Hello MoGraph crew. In this episode we'll cover the following: your flat lay self-portraits, class rules, MoGraph modules, podcast and media journals, and this week's to-do. So let's get started. Your flat lay self-portraits were a series of revelations. It was impressive to see how each of you found a creative way to capture yourselves enveloped by objects of personal significance. Here's some of the work produced by your peers. Now that we've shared a little bit about ourselves and practiced using this new remote learning platform, let's take some time to share our portraits with one another. Now, I know that having a discussion via video conferencing is a bit different, but it's vital that we make these interactions as meaningful as possible. Feel free to use these flat lay self-portraits in any way you like. They would be a great way to connect with family, friends, and your social media network. In order to make those meaningful connections, it's important we develop a positive class culture. To use a gaming analogy, a classroom culture is kind of like making sure everyone has equitable access to necessary gaming gear, and in a way that meets their needs. For example, everyone has working controllers, a monitor that displays the game action and has a reasonable refresh rate, functioning audio, and a stable internet connection. And if a gamer needs a little extra assistive technology to make sure they're included in the game, well, then we go out of our way to provide it. In the academic setting, this culture ensures an inclusive, fair, and fruitful experience. So last Friday, you all recommended some rules that we can use in our class. For simplicity, I've narrowed it down and packed the top 10 rules into a survey. Here, you'll vote for the top 5 rules that will begin to shape our class culture for the rest of the semester. To vote, head over to the MoGraph Class Rules Voting Survey in Week 2 on Canvas. This semester, we'll expand our digital storytelling skills by focusing on 3 key areas: the podcast, the short film, and the animated series. Now you may be wondering, hey, this is a motion graphics class. Shouldn't we be doing more digital design, animation, and graphics work? Under normal circumstances, yes. However, given the current format of our learning and the tools available to us, it is in the collective best interest to focus on work that we can all do with a minimum requirement of a mobile device and a desire to create compelling stories. That said, if you do have access to equipment and software to create more advanced graphics, you're more than welcome to use it for the work we do. So we'll begin where many of you left off in digital storytelling, with one of the most foundational, popular, and powerful forms of storytelling: the podcast. What podcasts have you listened to? Which ones have left a lasting impression on you? We'll begin by listening to some examples of podcasts, the first of which was featured on Kind World. It's called So Chocolate Bar. Where can I find this podcast? Good question. Head over to our Week 2 module, click on Podcast, So Chocolate Bar. As you're listening to So Chocolate Bar, ask yourself, what is this podcast really about? Then we'll begin our first media journal assignment. The media journal will be a way for us to reflect on the media we're consuming, and it will help inform our process of creating stories. For media journal number 1, I'd like to ask you to examine the podcast So Chocolate Bar by addressing the following questions. Under story focus, what is the main focus of the podcast? What is the driving question? For story structure, who is the main voice? How many speakers are there? What is the format? One-on-one interview, narrated story, compilation of multiple sound bites? For craft, how does the podcast utilize music and sound effects? How would you describe the editing style of the podcast? And for audio and message, how does this podcast represent the people in it? How does it engage the audience and keep their attention? And lastly, what will the listener remember after it's over? Now here's the cool part. In responding to these questions, you may write your response via the text editor, or you can record your audio or video response. To do this, head over to the assignment, click Submit Assignment, choose Media, record Upload Media. Allow Canvas to access your camera and microphone, and click Record. Submit once you've completed your response. I'm really looking forward to reading and listening or viewing your responses. On Friday, we'll listen to another podcast from a recurring segment on NPR called Hidden Brain. The name of this episode is called The Haunting Effects of Going Days Without Sleep. Then we'll examine this podcast using the same format as before. All of the scaffolding and analysis will position us to begin creating our own podcasts starting next week. So what do I have to do? Good question. Here is this week's to-do. Number 1, Media Journal number 1, So Chocolate Bar. And number 2, Media Journal number 2, The Haunting Effects of Going Days Without Sleep. And when does this all due? That's right, when every other assignment will be due, the last day of the school week at 11:59 p.m. That's this Friday, August 28th at 11:59 p.m. So that's it for this one, MoGraph crew. Next week, we'll begin the process of creating our first podcast. Until then, stay safe, stay focused, and stay connected.